All right, hello. Oh, excuse me. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Apologies for the delay, and I appreciate your patience as we get started. We're very excited. My name here is Kevin Wong. I'm senior pronouns, and I'm the program coordinator of our Asian Pacific Islander and Asian American Student Center, which is nestled under the Multicultural Student Center here in UW-Madison. This is the Red Gym. This is the Multicultural Student Center Lounge. I'm very excited to welcome you here for this exciting conversation that we're having. Before we begin, I do want to thank, of course, some of the team members that made this happen. Shout out in the back to Maggie Koenig, our programming intern. Shout out to Haruka Padilla for designing the flyer for the program as well. And then also, I want to bring to the stage one of our MSc interns, Manal Hassan, to introduce our guest speaker.
Hello, salam everyone. Thank you, Kevin, for that warm introduction. Before I get started, I would like to thank Wajahat for making this all happen. God knows where I would be without you, so thank you very much. And so now on to what you came here for. Time to introduce our esteemed guest, Wajahat Khan. A man who doesn't need an introduction, by the way, but I'll do my best. So Wajahat Khan is an Emmy-nominated journalist and author who focuses most of his time reporting on the Indo-Pacific security and the Afghanistan and Pakistan conflict. He's an adjunct professor at the New York University Center for Global Affairs, a non-resident senior fellow at Washington's Atlantic Council, and is a graduate of both the Columbia University School of Journalism and the University of Michigan. Wajahat is also Pakistan's only Shorenstein Fellow for Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. He's reported from 16 countries covering conflict, diplomacy, and media on the news. During the final years of the U.S. military operations in Afghanistan, he was the bureau chief in Kabul and Islamabad for NBC News. He was embedded with over 100 NATO, Afghan, India, and Pakistani military units as he covered South Asia for the leading networks in the US, Britain, India, Japan, and Pakistan since the beginning of the 2001 US invasion of Afghanistan. Recently, he served as the digital editor at Nikkei Asia, where he launched Nikkei's first podcast series and edited a popular weekend newsletter at the Eurasia Group. He frequently dabbles in cricket and is the author of the 2019 nonfiction bestseller Game Changer, being Shahid Afridi, and he lives between New York City, London, and Karachi. And we're very excited to welcome him to Madison, Wisconsin. So everyone, please give him a warm welcome.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Well, first and foremost, I do want to give a shout out to the Center for South Asia here at UW-Madison for helping co-sponsor this event. And we're very excited here at the PW Student Center to bring you into our space and have this conversation. It's very nice to have someone as, worldly traveled as yourself. And I guess one of the things I want to start with is really just, why are you here? So as Manal mentioned, you live in London, you live in New York, you live in Karachi, all over the place, but now you're back in the Midwest. You have roots in the Midwest in terms of where your education college-wise started, is that correct?
That's right. I almost thought you'd ask me why I wasn't earlier enough. I'm sorry I was late. I learned how to drive in Karachi. As you probably know, if you have experience, I'm not a very good driver. I will admit this. So I got lost, I took the wrong exit, and the rest is Chicago Loop history. But it's good to be back. I went to school in the Midwest, across the lake, in Michigan. Besides kicking Wisconsin's ass most of the time, but except this one time, which was amazing. I recall that. You guys had a fantastic running back. Besides that, it was good to have that inter-college rivalry while I was at Michigan, but so many Wisconsin games I went to during college, but never thought I'd be here 20-something years later in this territory. So yeah, this is Big Ten country, and I'm glad to be here. So first of all, thank you for having me. First of all, it's great to be back in the Midwest. It's great to be back where it all started. Besides that, it's also difficult. It's not easy being in America at this time. It's been a complicated journey back to the U.S., especially after 20 years of being out there, being back home. In fact, Kevin, the other day in the train, I think it was the one train in New York, I read this fantastic quote by Najib Mahfouz. They have this poetry. If you haven't been to New York, you got to take the subway. You got to go to New York, you got to take the subway, right? That's the rule. So there's this fantastic quote which says, which said that the temptation to, home is where the temptation to leave leaves you. And I thought that, after reading that for a quick minute, I thought I couldn't call Pakistan home anymore because I left. I left for what I thought was good reason. And I must say that I don't know how many expats are here. I don't know how many second generation or third generation Pakistanis are here. I can see there's some students here. There's some people who might go back. You know, it's really difficult to just make this decision at 40 something and just now you know how old I am, and just move on because the place was running out of oxygen, especially for people in the business that I am. And it was a very, very difficult move. So as happy as it makes me to come back to Michigan, come back to Wisconsin, back in the Midwest, be a resident of the greatest city in the world, which is New York, it's liberating, but it's also difficult because I do want to be back home. I do want to be back in Pakistan. Who doesn't? Especially as a reporter at a time like this. But I fear for what would happen. For the first time in a long time, I'm fearful. It's not a very good place to be for my family, for my colleagues, for my profession, even for my sources. I'm not a part of the picture. A journalist doesn't have to be the story, but I've become a part of the story, which is also complicated. So yeah, it's a difficult question you ask. Why am I here? I'm here because I can tell the story of my country better than I can tell it from there. My first 2 years, I worked in Midtown Manhattan, working for an organization, as Manal introduced me very kindly. I launched this first podcast for Nikkei, great group. Owned the FT, fantastic, the world's largest financial publication, fantastic, it was great. But we weren't covering my story. And I was missing that at a time like this. And I'm glad I'm working independently now, but do I want to go back home? Yes. Meanwhile, I will settle for Madison.
Well, we're glad you're here. You mentioned something about the climate for someone engaged in your work as a journalist, and I am curious. So when you went to Michigan, so University of Michigan, so you mentioned that they may have, there's a bit of a rivalry there. So one of the things that we do have, a little bit, but one of the things that we do have them beat on is that there is no School of Journalism in University of Michigan, but you were still involved in the school paper there. There is one here. So I'm curious in terms of how did you get involved in that, and do you think the impact of learning about journalism through Columbia and whatnot here in the United States, with the context of what free speech and journalism means in the United States, how has that affected the shaping of your journalistic journey, and how has that affected you when you've gone back to Pakistan?
You're such a good questioner, and you win that hands down, by the way. Yes, we do need a journalism school. We've needed one for decades in Michigan, and hurrah to Wisconsin for having one, and we missed that. And for those of us who missed that, there is a School of Information. I just met some students from there yesterday when I was in Ann Arbor, but it doesn't matter. Those of us who missed a J school on campus ended up at the Michigan Daily, which is a fantastic newspaper. It's more of a cult, actually. It's so good. It's once you're in the Daily, you're always in the Daily. But the Daily was famous for, and for those of you who are on-campus reporters, or are there any college reporters here? Is there anyone from the local paper? Well, it's
PBS Wisconsin.
Cool, right? Well, I mean, PBS is still not a local paper, but for those of you who don't have those grades to worry about, go ahead and work for the local paper, for the local college paper. It's amazing. You do so much. You start from the basics, and that's where I started. I started reporting on the first startups on campus, and then guess what? I delved into photography. I started a column, but then 9/11 happened, and it was actually my editor, Emily Ackenbaum, and a couple of my other co-editors who encouraged me to go ahead, stop studying for a minute, and actually go and cover what was happening in Afghanistan.
So did you take a break from school during that time?
I did. I took my exams early. 9/11 was, of course, in September, but by October, I was planning my trip. By November, I was gone. By December, I was on the front lines in Kandahar as the USAF was sending in its bombers. I was going that way as well on the ground in a rented motorcycle. While the Taliban were coming back at me with a camera from the Daily, and I was 20, and I had no life insurance, no health insurance. Do not try this at home. Please, it's not as sexy as it sounds, but it was fun. It's where I made my bones, and by the time I was back, I was lucky as an undergrad. A lot of you who are undergrads, even grad students, even after that, you don't know what you're doing. You may have a degree in one subject or the other, but you don't know what you're doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was back. By the time I was back, I was still a junior. I knew that this was going to be it. The war had come home. I had covered it, and the rest was history. The Daily was brave enough to back me. We changed the debate on campus. We ran several stories. We started debates. We moderated talks. We won a gold circle that year, which is the Pulitzer of college journalism. But it started a streak in the Daily for more stories. After me, another editor and I, we went to Cuba to cover, I don't know, it was the 50th or the 40th or 45th, something related to that. So while everybody else in spring break was going to Cancun, we were covering the revolution's anniversary in Cuba. So it's sort of started this momentum, which still hasn't stopped at the Daily, and I really recommend it. I really recommend you guys to give, even if you don't want to work full-time for your college paper, start a column, go meet the editor tomorrow, see how you can contribute. It's really important to be in touch with your community, because that's where it starts, local reporting. So thank you, PBS.
Well, you mentioned some of the accolades that you had over at the Daily at Michigan. So we actually did focus on advertising this as an Emmy-nominated journalist here. And so you were nominated for outstanding coverage of a breaking news story in a regularly scheduled newscast for your work as producer with NBC 90 was Lester Holt.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm curious, so that was for breaking news reporting specifically for the earthquake in Nepal in 2015. And so I'm curious, because that is a breaking news, how did you get involved? Was it something where you were already in the station when it happened and you just rode with it? Was it something that you were, on standby for in case something happened?
This guy's such a good questioner. Nobody asks these questions. It's a great story. So so the earthquake was felt all the way in Islamabad, which is very far from Nepal, by the way. For those of you who don't have a map, it's a couple of countries over, and that's how bad it was. And obviously, I was bureau chief, and I felt it. And the decision had to be made. And again, this is something which we learned at the Daily, but 15 years later, I had to execute it. The airport in Kathmandu is difficult to access anyways, and this time it was cracked. So the only planes which were going in were military planes. Obviously, I was on one phone with how to get there, with people about how to get there. On the other phone, I was talking to New York, London. This is NBC News. We have people all over the world. And while all the star anchors, Holt wasn't there, but we were on a show, all the star anchors and reporters at NBC's giant. There's so many people in play. A team of several dozen people had to be deployed from all over the world. So while everybody's getting their visas and doing everything else, I frankly was being Red Butler and saying, frankly, dear, I don't give a damn. I had to get there fast. It's all about getting on the ground first when it's about breaking news. You have to gain that advantage. You have to. It is a race against time. So I went outside a military base. I finagled my way in. I knew I'd get visa on arrival. I just had my backpack and my saddling gear. I left everybody else behind because nobody else in the bureau wanted to do this. This is what I did. I went on a C-130 of the Pakistani military, which was sending supplies overnight. There was no place to sit. There were no seats. There was only food and biscuits and gear for homeless people, for shelters. So I just stood for 6 hours in a military aircraft. I just stood like it was a bus. It was cold, there was no washroom. It was an emergency flight. And I First stood in the rain for it to take off on the tarmac. Then I stood in the plane, and when I got there, sometime later, the rest of the team was there. But I had that advantage. I had everything which a producer is supposed to do, the groundwork done, including sourcing with the highest echelons of the military and the government. So we had an advantage. We got nominated, but we lost to CNN. But still, it was fun to be there.
Yeah. All right.
No, but we lost to CNN on like I think it was a BLM story. It was something else. It was not an international story of this order.
Anderson Cooper, right?
Right.
All right. So now, being where things are happening is a huge part of what you do, and is very convenient. But also, you're now established as essentially a subject matter expert on a lot of things in the Pakistan region, specifically politically, and with regards to the Afghani-Pakistani conflict.
I don't know what you're smoking, man.
Well, I have it on good authority, because when we were coordinating and trying to get a time scheduled, this man actually told me, "Hey, I have to reschedule the call because I'm being interviewed for unfortunately a bombing that happened in Pakistan." But how has that career trajectory changed for you, and what do you think has led to a point where you are known as an individual that folks can go to talk about these things, not just as a reporter to like interview other people, but as a subject matter expert?
So the one thing, it's a good question. It's a difficult question as well, and it's a complicated question. There's a lot of people in this crowd, I think, who during the Q&A session might have an opinion. So I gained a reputation, rightly or wrongly, for really covering the elephant in the room, which is the Pakistani military. And the Pakistani military, as you know, is a complicated elephant. It's the world's fifth largest elephant, rather the world's fifth largest army. But it's also the only Islamic nuclear-armed army with the world's fastest growing nuclear arsenal. All of this was true 15 years ago or so when I started covering them. But this was the Pakistan army. So being a journalist in Pakistan, covering the army, was a complicated affair, because this is not a regular army when it comes to civil-military relations. There was, the armies conducted, till that time, they'd conducted at least 4 coups. They have each in their own. They have turned on the country, as they are prone to these days as well. There's a lot of interference in pretty much every sector of society, economy, industry. So when you say, "Hey guys, hey editor, hey boss, I want to cover the army," he's like, "What's wrong with you? A, are you suicidal? B, are you going to get a shutdown? C, do you want to keep your job?" But I think I pry it open. I convinced enough people, including in the army and at work. That was around 15 years ago, around 15 years ago, yes, exactly, actually, 2007-8, at Dawn, which is the premier publication in the country. And that's where it all started for me, and I ended up spending weeks, months on the front lines with the army, convincing them that opening yourselves up is good for you, so that the country can understand how you work, not just your dirty deeds, but actually what you do. Because at the end of the day, it is a professional army. It does fight insurgencies. It does go eyeball to eyeball with India. It does take on the Taliban. It does take on Baloch insurgents. It does do important work for the national security of Pakistan. And that's what I highlighted. Now, this became a complicated affair because this is the army. And again, a lot of people are like, "Oh, but you're covering the army, you're giving the army airtime, and you're doing the army's propaganda." Not really. Every journalist, every defense correspondent, every national security correspondent in the world, whether it's David Ignatius at the Post or anybody else for that matter, has to get inside an organization to show you how it works. Because Pakistan is not a nation at peace. It's been at war successively, multiple times, consistently even. It's at war right now. One of the region's longest insurgencies is running in Pakistan since 2006 or 7. Now it's become 2. ISIS is operating in Pakistan. How can you not cover the military? You can go la 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 la, and no, I'm not going to cover you because you're terrible to the Islamic Republic's constitution. But my job is not to make ethical decisions. My job is to make decisions which break news. Ethical decisions are made by my editors. Ethical decisions are made by people every day. I can only do ethical reporting, not just say, all right, this organization has killed people, this organization has conducted coups, this organization has played a double game with the Americans and sided with the Taliban, so I'm not going to cover this organization. How can you wish away the world's 5th largest military? So it was a very difficult, very, very painful. It was difficult at home, difficult at the lunch table with my family, difficult at the bar with my buddies, difficult at the coffee shop with friends. To explain that, I'm still explaining that to people here, that you have to get inside a story. Whether it's, it's like interviewing a terrorist. You have to get inside the guy's head to understand what he wants. Do you approve of him or her? No. Or them? No, you don't. But it was like that, Kevin. It was a difficult beat to develop. And I developed it. It was a niche. I was a niche which I think is still worth covering, because it's an important institution. So again, it was an ethical decision. I made it. I stand by it. It's complicated, but hey, that's the gig.
You kind of touched on this already. So one of the questions that we had from some of our folks who RSVP'd was what's your approach to covering politics in a polarized environment, not just with respects to Pakistan's politics in general, but also specifically, like you mentioned, the military itself. Feel free to elaborate on that if you would like. But a follow-up question I have for you is, how do you approach people to get those interviews then? And do you think that your reputation that you have with how you navigate and deal with these questions, who you do or do not approach for interviews, has that had an influence on who is willing to talk to you or who may not be as willing to talk to you?
So that's a good question. It's a good question generally for everyone who's even not a journalist, right? It's a question which is like, how should I wake up and, if my job is to meet people and report on them, right? Who should I be in touch with and who should I not be in touch with? It's like networking. It's actually like being a socialite as well. Journalism isn't for antisocial people, right? It's just not. You gotta be able to talk to people at their own wavelength. But of course, it's complicated in a place like Pakistan, especially when you're working on, for example, the military or the political parties, because, well, they have their axe to grind. They have their agendas. They want their story told and not necessarily a story which needs to be told. Premised on that, I go with shotgun tactics. It's something I learned painting houses in college when I was trying to pay for school back in Michigan. You knock on every door when you're cold calling. You splash in every direction and you try to land somewhere. If it's a breaking news situation, for example, just to give you guys a perspective, one of my colleagues, Imran Khan, I know Imran Khan is a famous name, but this is another Imran Khan, Imran Khan. He's a fantastic journalist. He's got millions of followers on YouTube. He was abducted for 100 and something days, I think 137 to be exact, maybe a little more. 137 days, just a few months ago. We didn't know where he was. We didn't know whether he was alive or dead. We know that he went to the airport. He was picked up by the cops there. A couple of days later, he was gone. A tribunal was set up for him, investigations, cases, nothing happened. He was just gone. Everybody knew where he was, and yet it was like being in a Harry Potter novel. Those who had him could not be named. And one day, he just turns up and goes AWOL in his house, obviously, to protect his privacy. I'm in touch with his family, but I just wanted to confirm as well. So all I needed was a confirmation, right? And I started making calls. Now this is a story about people who cannot be named. So nobody wants to say, yes, he's been released or not. This is just minutes before his release. This is when it's all a rumor. And that's where the theme of disinformation is really important to touch here. We're in an election year in this country. There's a lot of disinformation. We're in the middle of the Israel-Gaza war. There's a lot of disinformation. And more is coming your way through social, through your mom's and your family's WhatsApp groups. It's coming, trust me. It's not gonna stop. There's whole factories, enterprises, and industry dedicated to it. Governments do it, non-governments do it. All I needed was a confirmation. So I just started calling all the cops that I had, whether it was a guy who'd given me a traffic ticket right? In Islamabad, where there was a guy who ran an anti-terrorist squad, irrelevant. All I needed was a cop to tell me. Now, the cops were the ones who were involved in this. And finally, I got someone to recognize me, acknowledge me. A lot of people are not talking to me these days because they don't want to get burnt, because I am PNG'd, I'm persona non grata out of Pakistan. It's a difficult story for them to say, yes, you can put my name in your blog and say I told you. They lose their job, maybe more. So that's how you go ahead. That was an emergency. That's a drastic example. But just in terms of getting published, you have to be balanced, right? So if you cover a party, the People's Party, for example, in one show, then you better cover the next party in the other show. Balance is important in regular reporting. Balance is important in life. But in emergencies, you throw open that contact list and do what you need to do to get the confirmation, but always get the confirmation. That's the rule, and there's no two ways about it.
Do you think that has gotten more difficult in a climate where there is, like you mentioned, misinformation and doubt of not just what's floating out there, but also there is doubt of journalists and what you all are doing? And how do you enforce that you are a journalist with integrity? And how do you make sure that you communicate to your audience that you are someone who can be relied on?
I think that comes through years. That comes through years of trying to build credibility. Credibility is very, very difficult to build, especially in a place like Pakistan, where there's a lot of soothsaying, there's a lot of leg pulling. So many good journalists have been compromised. A lot of people, because of the structure of the industry, a lot of good journalists end up getting marred by the organizations they work for. So all of a sudden, you might be this great kick-ass journalist who's trying his or her their best to do what you need to do, but you might be doing whatever you want to do, but maybe your boss is on the tick. You know, all of a sudden, right now, a recent drama which has unfolded is they've released just weeks ago. They've released a list of all the major networks, and these are networks I watch. These are networks I love. All of them, Kevin. All of the major networks have been subsidized. That's the term, by the military-backed government. Now that means it's been done through ads, it's been done through revenues, but the government has nothing to sell. This is an incredibly lackluster government in the last 16 months. What project have you sold? What have you done? What dam have you made? What factory have you set up? What economic activity have you got to market here? You got the world's definitely one of the world's highest inflation rates. You got the world's worst performing one of the world's worst performing currencies. You've got a country which is on its 25th bailout, or 23rd or 24th, irrelevant, 20-something bailout with the IMF, and yet you're doling out billions of rupees for advertising. What exactly are you advertising? You're not advertising, you're just paying the bosses of these networks to shut the hell up, so that people, my colleagues, are not as vociferous in their critique. And it was quite horrifying to see. So governments do give ads. People run campaigns. They do it in this country. There's laws to check that. You can't do too many ads. You can't do, there's limits and caps. I understand. And this country works that way. But this was unbelievably loaded as a tactic. The fact that it came out, and the fact that it's just, obviously none of those organizations covered the story, because why would you cover yourself that you've been on the take? Especially when those billions could have gone to subsidizing the poor, controlling the cost of wheat, of rice, of sugar, basic necessities which the people of Pakistan, 5 million kids right now, 5 million kids are starving from and don't have access to clean drinking water since the floods last year. It could have gone to, I don't know, 1 million of those kids, those billions of rupees. They didn't. So it's quite complicated in terms of the organizations you work for. I hope I didn't digress from your question, though.
No, that's fine. I want to make sure that you can chat about the things that you feel are salient to the questions and to the topic at hand. But you did mention something about like now, depending on the networks you work for, you mentioned now you're independent and you can, kind of have more freedom to pick and choose. Do you feel like in the past, especially when you've worked for American institutions or international institutions, that you've been, due to your identity as a Pakistani man, cornered into saying, you know what, we need someone to report in that region. Instead of picking anyone, it's you. Mr. Khan can go over there. Do you feel cornered by that? Or do you feel like you are passionate and that is a topic that is near and dear to your heart and something that you do care about, and so you have sought out those opportunities to be reporting about the region that is your home?
I think less about me and more about the Pakistan story, right? So this has to be less about me, I think, this question particularly, and more about what's happening in the region and why it's sort of, this is an anomaly, right? So like 15, 20 years ago, the Pakistan-Afghanistan story, the war, it was happening every 4 weeks in every campus in the US, right? It hasn't been happening. A friend of mine, Sadanand Dhum, he is at the Wall Street Journal. He's a columnist, excellent columnist. He did a story recently analyzing how many times Pakistan has been mentioned in the New York Times last year versus 10 years ago. And Pakistan, I think, if I don't, you should check the story. I'm getting old, but I think it's almost 10%. So since the summary, what I'm trying to say is that 10 years ago, there was 10 times more stories. The word Pakistan was used in the New York Times, the yardstick of this country's journalism, right? Was used 10 times more in 10 years. Maybe it was 15 times, it was some ridiculous number. Now, mainstream American media, that means, if we can use that as a yardstick, that means mainstream American media has lost interest. There has been Afghanistan fatigue as well. I was the last bureau chief for NBC in Kabul. I was told as legendary bureau, Kevin. So many stories have been told from there. So many star reporters and anchors have come from that, right? So many great American heroes have been interviewed there because of the war. But I think it was 16 when I got my orders to lock up the bureau. We fired over 30 people, producers, reporters, guards, drivers. We shut that bureau down. All we paid for, I think we got a deal with the AP, or was it Reuters? We just rented a desk, we got a fixer, and a multi-million-dollar operation was just wrapped up overnight. And that's how ruthless corporate media is. And guess what? NBC was smart because the US military followed 4 years later, and they left in a similar way. This is this country's longest war was gotten rid of like it's bad takeout. You just throw it away. You smell it, it's nasty, and it's gone. Till today, just today, 100 and something thousand, numbers vary, 130, 140,000 people were pushed by Pakistan. Refugees were pushed across the border in what one newspaper, The National, has said is the biggest single expulsion of a mass population since the 1950s. And the Pakistanis have used this at a time when global headlines are dominated by the Palestinian-Israel crisis. It's brilliant stuff from those generals. But these are people who've had not one but two, these are third-generation refugees who've been living without an identity, a homeland, out there somewhere since the 1980s, since the Americans, the Soviets, the Pakistanis, the Arabs, the Israelis, the Chinese, and everybody had their way with Afghanistan. So the war, whether it's been the war in Pakistan or the war in Afghanistan, has been forgotten. And I had a lot of trouble working with my mainstream bosses in the US and the UK, trying to convince them, trying to pitch stories. By the end of it, whether it was my jobs in New York or my jobs in London, I'm not going to take names, but you know, check my resume, you know which organizations I'm talking about. My editors were not interested. And one day somebody just told me, they said, there's Pakistan fatigue, there's AFPAC fatigue, Waj. It's boring. Come up with something else. And I did for a bit. And then I thought that was boring because my story needs to be told. My country's story needs to be told. And so I made a decision to go independent, and I am not regretting it. Yes, it leaves you vulnerable. It leaves you without insurance. It leaves you without cover. Saying I work independently, this is me. That's the office right there. There's no team of corporate lawyers hovering behind me to give me independence or grant me leverage. If I get sued, God forbid, if I get killed, right, or worse or more, irrelevant, but it's, at least I can tell the story. And I think that's what drives me. I wake up every morning and nobody tells me what to do. I do it because the story has to be told, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm glad that you're here to support independent journalism. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Before we open it up for some questions to the audience, because you mentioned that transition from working for bigger institutions, journalistic outfits and whatnot, and then going independent. Now that you're free from the shackles of working for somebody else and having that freedom to engage in the stories that you feel are important, is there still a dream story that you've always wanted to cover that you still have not had the chance to cover?
Oh yeah, for sure. My dream story is covering India. India is the great prize for me. Really trying to grapple with the world's largest democracy. Booming India, rising India, complicated India, but very, very, it's a very difficult story. I have family members of my family were lost in the partition. There's that connection. There is, of course, as a Pakistani, India is the great parallel universe. It's the twilight zone. I mean, I can be I can dig a hole from Pakistan and end up, I don't know, in Hawaii. But that's not as interesting as what's right next door, because India is it's the great promise. It's also the great peril. It's the great arch rival, but it's also the complicated neighbor. In current Indian politics has made Pakistan and Pakistanis, because of its hyper-nationalism, a boogeyman. But yet, India, as a Pakistani, as a young Pakistani, you end up watching Indian movies, playing the Indian cricket team, having Indian heroes. But then at school, or you're socialized into not liking India. And I've been lucky enough to have covered India not once, not twice, but 4 times. I've had 4 different assignments, whether it's been school trips or whether it's been debates or whether it's been official assignments. But things are that was a while ago. The last trip I made to India was right before the current Modi regime was in office. Since then, journalism exchanges, scholarly exchanges, academic exchanges, it's a pity. They've really dried up on both sides. And I think it's really important to understand the promise and the peril that is India, to really understand what went wrong with Pakistan, which is a theme we must touch on, right? Which is, at least for my vlog today, which we're doing live, that's my perspective, that what would our founders think today, where we ended up, right? And what would Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the greatest lawyer of his time, they used to say, Kevin, was the man who founded Pakistan, right? Constitutionalist, well-spoken, articulate, Savile Row suits, whiskey swigging, cigar chomping, argued his way with Churchill and Gandhi and Nehru, argued all those 3 under the table. No violence. Well, this mix and match, he's blamed for some, but no, never served a day in jail, always stuck to the letter of the law, debated, discoursed his way through years, left the most lucrative practice in India. He had the biggest house in Bombay, on the sea, right by there, and left it all to make this country. Secular thinker, some say. His lifestyle admits it. Died too early. And I'm wondering if he were around today, whether he'd want his house back. And I'm wondering if because the Indian government has taken custody of his house and refuses to give it to Pakistan. which is another great tragedy of partition. But yet, there's all this shared history, personal, political, and I can't tell that story. I can be in Wisconsin, but I can't do this in India, right next door, which is a 45-minute flight away from Karachi. Karachi is the twin city of Bombay. Lahore is the twin city of Delhi. This parts of Lahore, you walk in, you feel like you're Delhi, and vice versa. This parts of Karachi, when you just open your ear, you hear Bombay, you smell Bombay, and yet you can't visit. I'm not romanticizing India. There's serious problems in the way the Indians are running their system, but I'd like to explore it historically and contemporarily as well. That's my dream story. And I'd love to interview Amitabh Bachchan, in case you're interested. What would I do there? First stop, he would be it.
Well, thank you so much. Now, I just got you talking about what you could do if, your dream story and whatnot. I'm going to bring you back, and here you're not beholden to another corporation or whatnot, but we have an audience. I know some folks have submitted some questions. We may not have gotten to all of them, but I want to make sure there is still time for y'all to ask your questions onto Mr. Khan live in this space right now. So I'm going to ask you to indulge some of their questions if you don't mind. That said,
Absolutely.
I'm going to set this mic up over at this podium. If anyone does have questions, please come on up from our orderly line. Do ask, if you have a question, make sure it is a question. And so it ends with a question mark, and we'll just do a very quick transition while I get that mic set up, and anyone who has questions that they do want to ask, please come on up.
Maybe it would be better if, do we have a cordless mic?
We do not, unfortunately.
We could, in case people are feeling, thinking about the podium, I would. Maybe they can just speak from their seats.
Yeah, I can also try and bring the mic over to folks who are close enough, as long as I don't have to stretch to the very back of the room.
Okay, I'll follow you. I'll follow you. I'll just follow you at the camera.
Does anyone have questions? All right.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, welcome to Madison. My question to you is, I'm sure if you've seen the news, I actually watched a recent video about...
You're live, by the way. I hope that's okay.
Sorry?
You're live.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right.
I watched a recent video about the Imran Khan poisoning story, which is gaining traction to the point where a photo was released, I won't say leaked, I'll say released, of him sitting in that police car with that police officer from September, probably before his one Adiala, or on the way to Adiala jail. You mentioned in your video the pace at which things are going in Pakistan. In 16 to 17 months, they basically decapitated an entire party. With this pace and with the stuff that's been going on with Sanam Javed being incarcerated and stuff with even Yasmin Rashid and all these figures getting incarcerated for long periods of time. Imran Khan, for example, do you see any way that, Imran Khan's already in jail, they've already subsidized networks and stuff like you said. Do you just see a way to just let him off? Let him off, just end him off. Without repercussion, because at this state of the state Pakistan's in right now, I don't think anyone has a say in that or will have any, major uprising, I guess, because everything is so subdued by that military presence. But anyway, that's my question.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take that. So I'm going to recap. So your question was, it was a difficult question, but your question is that Imran Khan is in trouble, and do you think, you fear, or you're asking that they might, right? And what's going to happen next? Is that what you're saying? Is that the lubab of your question? Okay. So I'm not going to predict what they're going to do with Khan. I can only analyze what they are doing with Khan, and then maybe we can, draw conclusions, right? So I really need all of you to put your history caps on. Okay? So there is the Liaquat Ali Khan formula. You know who that was? First Prime Minister of Pakistan, making a speech, killed. Nobody knows who did it, right? He's the Kennedy of Pakistan, right? They found a guy, but right, it wasn't him, right? Okay. The Liaquat Ali Khan formula, knock him out, he's in public, there's going to be chaos, blame it on one shooter, two, convolute the case. They've tried that. The guy lives. The case is convoluted. It was this time, exactly this month, almost to the date that Khan was killed. There was an attempted assassination on Khan. November 3rd, 4th, look it up. 2nd, almost to the date, exactly a year ago. Wow, okay. Ironic. So let me run you through this. Do you know what the shooter's name was? No. I'm gonna buy you a drink if you remember his name. Tonight. I'm doing it. I'm buying you a barrel if you can. No? Nobody knows. A guy shoots down or tries to shoot down Imran Khan, kills some other people, bystanders. He's gone. Now they're saying he's being tried. Do you know that you remember the guy? You remember the guy who shot? I don't know, JFK. We were on the topic, right? We all know Lee Harvey Oswald, right? Because there's movies that have been made about him. The case was there, and then he was killed, and blah blah. What I'm trying to say is that they tried to do a liaquat, whoever they is. I'm not saying who. Somebody tried to do a liaquat. Chaos, multiple shooters, multiple theories. By the way, 5 people were picked up in that assassination. 5, including 2 people from the PMLN, 2 people who work for the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, which is the incoming party, as they're saying. So the party which is about rule Pakistan, Kevin, has had 2 of its workers arrested for attempting to assassinate Imran Khan, who I don't need to introduce you to, obviously, but that whole case is gone. The other but the formula didn't work. The other formula, of course, which is often cited, is the Bhutto formula. People fear the Bhutto formula, but guess what? The Bhutto formula worked really well. I hate being Machiavellian about this, but it really worked well for the rest of the Bhuttos, right? The rest of the Bhuttos still draw their strength, and the Zardaris, they draw their strength. Bhutto abhi bhi zinda hai, right? Somewhere out there, he's still there, and he's still getting millions of votes. So they don't want to create a martyr out of him. However, the current case he's been tried under it's a national secret. It's a national security case being tried, and he's being tried under the Official Secrets Act. And as the price you pay for that sort of crime is death. So he's liable for capital punishment. So they could potentially pull a Bhutto. Their math might be different. Again, I'm going to say, you know who they is. I'm not going to name any institution. They cannot be named. Let's just pretend we're in a Harry Potter novel, right? But the powers that be, let's call them that, right? They want, if they have him where they want him, if they want to execute the Bhutto formula. So they have him where they want him, but they've learned from the hanging of Bhutto that when you execute a popular leader, he lives on, his message lives on. But Khan's at a disadvantage. There's no dynasty waiting for him. There's no sons or daughters he has. And his party is dismembered anyways, mostly. So he's in a more vulnerable spot for the Bhutto formula. The third formula, of course, is the Mandela formula. A lot of people are talking about that. Just put him away for 30, 40 years, people are going to forget about it. That's not going to work out too well for him. Mandela was a young man when he was incarcerated. So he could do his 31, 35 years. But, I mean, Khan's 71. I know he's a fit Pathan, but, you know, everybody's got their limits, right? So I don't know, that might not work out too well for him. And then the fourth one is the Morsi formula. Of course, I'm talking about the democratically elected president of Egypt, not this current one, the guy who preceded him, who ruled for just 1 year, and then he was tried in jail, and he was tried after tried, and then he was literally, he was talking to a judge, and he collapsed, and they said it's slow poisoning or whatever. Nobody knows, it's the Egyptians. The Egyptian military has been ruling that country, much like the Pakistani military, since the 50s, except they've never ceded control. At least the Pakistani military cedes control. So the Morsi formula, that just engage him in a trial and then make it a scam and wrap it up. So these are the 4 options. Now you tell me which one you would do if you were sitting there as a general, right? Because what you have is the world's 5th largest country at stake here. And that is, I think, the thrust of your question. Will people rise for Imran? Well, Did people rise when Benazir Bhutto was killed? Maybe for like, what, 4 or 5 days. I was in Karachi, just trouble. But by the 5th day, I was driving around getting my, mac and cheese from wherever, right? So I was doing my takeout runs by the 5th day of those riots. So people rise and then people go home. Bhutto was killed, executed by the state. People rose here and there, but this is the age of digital freedom. Social media compounds that. The country is younger than it's ever been. It's the youngest, one of the youngest countries in the world. There's a huge youth bulge. Knocking out Imran Khan, God forbid, shouldn't talk like this about anyone, but may the heavens never permit injustice in any country or land, but if they do execute, murder, assassinate, give the Martians a call and have them abduct Imran, whoever, whatever tactics they deploy, I don't think that Pakistan is a place where people rise for long. They might rise for a few days. We've seen people rose when he was incarcerated on May 9th. There was a couple of days of riots, and most of those people are now under arrest. They're paying for it dearly. So his second arrest, and rather his sentencing and his second arrest was, as you know, is still being suffered. And Imran Khan does not have a very bright future. So I would write that one off for now. You're looking at a post-Imran. I think we need to start talking, this is really important, guys. We need to start talking about a post-Imran world. A world which does not have Imran Khan. But guess what? It has you. It has younger people. It has at least 150, 160 million people who are under the age of 30. It's a lot of people. Most of Pakistan right now will outlive Imran Khan. Like I said, he's 71. He may be, the fittest 71-year-old we know. God knows he's one of the better looking ones, right? But, this can't be about Imran. Pakistan's current plight you can't just sit here in Wisconsin or elsewhere and say, Imran, please release Imran Khan. No. You should be talking about fundamental change. And there's so many things you can talk about in terms of reforms, but the one change that you must bring forward as dinner table conversations, as research papers, policy proposals, classes, I don't care, I don't know what you guys do. But you gotta start talking about military reforms in Pakistan. Because tomorrow if the aliens do abduct Khan, and if Nawaz Sharif does go golfing, and if Asif Zardari does move to Vegas and does what he's good at, right? And they all go away, this entire system of civilian leaders, the good ones and the not so good ones, go away. The army will still be there, staring you down, atrophying your fundamental rights, waiting for you at the airport, watching your Twitter, checking your emails, freezing your bank accounts, abducting your cousins or friends or roommates who go back and say something angry on Twitter and then they're gone. So that elephant will be in the room, and it's a very big elephant. And that's something which we need to start talking amongst ourselves, and we need to start talking to the army as well about. And that's a difficult conversation.
So my question relates a little bit to what you touched about before, but we're on a college campus. Many of us are young, especially the front row. But like the front row, a lot of them consume their media through social media, right?
I love the sass.
No, they're all my uncles and aunties, but so a lot of them consume their news through social media, like WhatsApp or even TikTok and things like that. So my question to you is, how do you see with, not consuming it through TV news or print news, with social media and the amount of disinformation that is out there, like you said, with the recent things that are happening in Gaza, how do you recommend that people navigate disinformation? And then also, like you said, mobilize people towards that change?
Okay, so that's an incredibly difficult question. It's incredibly difficult because, we're sitting in a system here. Let's just concentrate on Israel and Gaza for a minute, right? You're looking at a system here where the BBC just did this report, and so did Al Jazeera last week. The biggest disinformation factory in the war between the Israelis and the Palestinians is where? Pub quiz. Again, I'll buy you a drink, and you're not getting that drink. It's not Gaza. Gaza doesn't have electricity. So where is, let me ask the question again, in case I didn't ask properly. Where is the biggest disinformation factory on planet Earth?
India.
Yes, India. I'm buying you a drink. Okay, so India is where the world's biggest, according to the BBC and Al Jazeera. Verified reports, lots of reporting, lots of people are waiting. The Australian government has waited, everybody's waiting. Why? Why is, think about this for a minute. The war is there, right? If you're going to be really religious about this, right? The war is between two faiths, right? And a piece of land and the Bible and the Old Testament, all of that. Like, let's not get complicated about the war, right? It's a complicated war. It's colonization, all of that. It's human rights. I'm not interested in the war. I'm interested in answering a question. Why India? Well, according to the analysts who've been watching this space, the Indians have a very anti-Muslim government. It's called the Bharatiya Janata Party. It's a very, very good government when it comes to economic changes in India. India is booming economically. It's a very, very good government when it comes to diplomacy. India just hosted the G20, etc., etc. It's a very, very good government when it comes to consumer spending. There's a Bloomberg story today that there's a line at the Rolex store, at every Rolex store in India. There's an 18-month list. So watch that space, Kevin, for your Rolex, for your next one, right? 18 months you have to wait in India for a Rolex. It's a great government. I want to be in a country where I have to wait 18 months for anything. But there's a Rolex, so fine. But why? Because they don't like Muslims. Because that makes them get votes. I'm not saying this. The Beeb, Al Jazeera, the Aussie government, other analysts, other think tanks, you should go read the reports. And so they're using this conflagration, which clearly has a religious basis. Let's just be honest with ourselves. This is not just about colonization. This is about Judaism versus Islam at some level, at some basic level, though there are other faiths there as well. So they're using that right now to fan the flames of conflict and also make an anti-Muslim debate, fan an anti-Muslim debate in India, which is heading into an its election year. This is happening from the IT cell of the BJP as we speak. Which, by the way, the BJP gets the most amount of votes on the planet. So it's a proper entity. These aren't just a bunch of thugs. These are thugs who get votes. This is the dark side of democracy. And you're worried about the North Koreas of the world. I'm not. I'm worried about the good guys. I'm worried about people who, like the Indians, are supposed to be the good guys. The world's largest democracy. That's how they market themselves. And yet they have this dark side. So that's happening at a larger level. If you can't stop governments, how can you stop your mom's WhatsApp feed from peddling disinformation? And unfortunately, that's where you're at. The US is going through, there's a young woman called Lina Khan, she's a Pakistani American. She's running a campaign right now for the Biden administration in her position in the government to rein in big tech. Now, she's just, a couple of weeks ago, she just sued Amazon. She's written some great work. She's done some great work on the darker corporate side of big tech. But big tech is a thing now. We're on big tech right now. It's ironic that a Pakistani American is heading this campaign and she's paying for it dearly. But the Biden administration is behind her. We can only support her. However, I don't think she's going to have a job for very long, which is because there's enough analysis out there that from Elon Musk's takeover, especially since his takeover of Twitter, where he's just sort of opened the floodgates. And by the way, some of these disinformation folks are on Twitter and they have verified accounts, which Musk will let you have. You will pay money, get that blue tick, and then spread disinformation, and Musk is okay with that as long as you're paying him. That's the gist of the Musk business model. And seeing Musk's business model do well, the Metas of the world and the Googles of the world are also saying, today, in this day, November 2nd, the year of our Lord, 2023, you are less prone to getting fined, flagged for disinformation, less prone than you were 5 years ago, at a time when it's increased, because the business model doesn't make sense to these guys. So this is a larger argument. Way smarter people than me are tackling this at the highest levels of government in the world. But when you have the world's biggest vote getter in the world's biggest democracy, I don't even know how many people vote for the PG. 400 million people, 500 million people. It's ridiculous. How do you control that sort of power? So it's a difficult question to answer. The only thing I can suggest is, it's like picking a restaurant. You try it. If you get sick, don't go again, right? If you get burnt by this data, don't go again. And this is a good time to support independent journalism. There's Declassified in the UK, they do brave work. There's The Intercept right here, they do brave work, but they're broke. There's me, so am I, right? So it's you got to support independent reporting wherever you get it. PBS should be supported as well. So yeah, you got to soldier on, man. That's my advice, but it's difficult. Yes, sir.
All right, if you don't mind. Oh, I'm sorry. If you don't mind, we got a question here, and then we'll move over back there.
This is fun. Are you guys enjoying yourselves? Right. Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of a loaded question.
No.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to be as straightforward as possible. But so you alluded to how Pakistan has this 23rd or 24th bill from getting built by the IMF again, and recently, having lived in Pakistan, we hear that we might go into a situation like Sri Lanka did recently, where the country goes into default. But they kind of have found a way out of it, I think. And you said some people have to make ethical decisions, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you had any say, what would be your ethical solution to this economic crisis? And side question, talking about Afghanistan, how do you see Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan going in the future? And do you think it's ethical? Or what do you think are the ethics behind deporting that many people? And having experienced that before, I've experienced friends getting deported recently, and I wouldn't call them Afghans, is what I'm trying to say, in my opinion, because they've spent their whole lives in Pakistan, so what do you think is the ethical solution?
Okay, so that's a good question. It's a difficult question. I'm sorry for your friends. I'm really sorry. So I'm from Quetta, and I grew up in the days in that city when the refugee crisis, the Afghan crisis, was being birthed, when it was being born, and that first wave of refugees hit our streets, our parks, our neighborhoods. I remember that one day, this park I used to play with my cousins in, some of them were girls, this Afghan chowkidar, the guy who takes care of business, he stopped the girls. He said, "You can go in because you're a boy, they can't go in." That's my first memory of an Afghan refugee. Big tall guy, big collar, big beard. Not a good memory. The Afghans definitely have a complicated story. Not every refugee is or lives like a refugee. Right now, today, Afghan refugees run some of the country's most lucrative businesses. They have invested in transport systems. They run trucking companies. Their kids go to private schools. Some of them run guns. Some of them run drugs. Some of them run prostitutes. Some of them have private jets. And yet they enjoy the refugee status. However, many of them are still without shelter or identity. Many of them call that, we go back to that Najib Mahfouz quote about the temptation, home is where the temptation to leave leaves you. That wasn't home for them. They don't want to leave Pakistan, that's home. There's not one, but 2 or 3 generations of refugees. This is one of the world's largest refugees population. It's up there with the Palestinian population. 4 million came to our country. 4 million, around the same, went to Iran. Now, Pakistan and Iran have very different experiences with the Afghan crisis, the Afghan refugee crisis. The Iranians kept them blocked in camps and settlements, right? Pakistan just opened the door and said, all right, come to Karachi, come to Lahore, go wherever. Oh, you can't afford to? Okay, live in this camp. You want to leave this camp? Go ahead, do your thing. People did. I don't know what the ethical take on this is, but I do know that home is where the temptation to leave leaves you. Today, the Afghan cricket team has better players than the Pakistan cricket team. Some of them grew up in refugee camps. It's not a game you played in Afghanistan 20 years ago, this one, but they played it in Pakistan. They learned it in Pakistan. They're the dream, they're the Cinderella story of cricket right now. They're about to go into the semi-final. My God, how can you kick these people out? But it's still a question because some of them have, well, abused. It's an abusive relationship both ways. Pakistan has abused their presence to tell the world, look at us. Oh, we've been giving these millions of these people refuge. Look at what they've done to our country. They've torn the social fabric. They bring in heroin. They bring in extremism. You know, they blow stuff up. Oh, they're horrible. But because we're so generous, we house them. Please give us some money. That's Pakistan's story, officially. The money stopped, so now this is happening. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Afghans say, oh, we hate Pakistan. Pakistan sucks. Pakistan's been sponsoring the Taliban, before them the Mujahideen, before them God knows who. Pakistan's worse than India, Iran, and the New York Yankees combined, right? Pakistan sucks, right? We hate Pakistan, but we'll still go to Pakistan, live there, right? Use its land to exploit its resources, invest, marry its families, buy its houses, enjoy the freedom and the comforts of Pakistan, enjoy its education, its roads, its better infrastructure. And yet they hate Pakistan, a lot of them. I felt very uncomfortable when I was bureau chief in Kabul telling people I'm Pakistani. Wasn't a happy place for me. I was more comfortable telling people in India that I'm Pakistani. This has never happened. I'm a Pathan. That didn't matter. So it's a complicated, abusive relationship. So I think you ask a very good question. What are the ethical dynamics of it? I think we've got to figure this out beyond stated positions. It's a complicated question. To your point about the IMF, I don't get your question. Can you repeat that question? What's the ethical way out of the IMF?
No, it's not like what's the ethical way out of IMF, but like, do you see Pakistan going in the direction that Sri Lanka did and going into like a default situation? Or do you see like the government or whoever's in charge, do you see them finding a way out of this economically? Like, do you see it getting better or do you see it getting worse?
Okay, so if the question is that are we defaulting, then no, we're not defaulting. Nice shirt, man. Okay, so if we're not defaulting, right? So hold your horses there, right? However, you got to really listen. Stop getting lost in the news. Okay, always take the long view, and everything will make sense, and you'll go home happy. This is the long view. The long view is that Pakistan is a rentier state. It's not a normal state. It's like clients, right? It rents out its space. Pakistan's biggest asset is its geopolitical placement. It's got some of the world's craziest borders. Let's count them: Iran, Afghanistan, China, India. My God, let's take a closer look at these guys. The world's largest democracy, the world's fastest growing economy, also India. Of course, the other superpower these days, China, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the world's craziest dictatorship, right? And the Taliban, right? You're looking at a complete geopolitical nightmare which Pakistan resides in the middle of. Lots of promise, but also a lot of peril. And this has been the case for years. And Pakistan has sold its space, almost like frat boys lease out their parking spots on game day, right? Come and park here. They do that in this town? We do that in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, it's like minimum $30. It's a good racket.
Yeah, it's a great racket. And that's, well, in Pakistan's case, it's been billions of dollars. Pakistan is that frat boy which gives out space on game day. And it's been game day for a while. The Cold War was a great game day, right? You got a lot from the Americans for your services rendered against the Soviets. The latter days of the Cold War in Afghanistan was an even better game day, right? Because you had the Red Army at your footsteps. They were right there at your doorstep. And the Americans gave you anything and everything you wanted, and you ran the jihad for them. It was Jihad Incorporated. Then you've been running a game day racket with the Chinese for services rendered against the Indians. The Chinese don't like the Indians don't like the Chinese. Natural rivalry, borders, first largest, second largest country. We don't have to think too much about this, right? Pakistan's like, hey, I can help you. And they did, and they still are. But guess what? All those rackets are drying up. So Pakistan's looking for a new racket. I hate sounding facetious about this, but it's true. It's looking for a nice racket because these people who run the country refuse to invest in becoming a normal state, which makes things. They still make towels. The textile is a 1980s, 90s industry. Towels cannot be, in this day and age, textiles cannot be your biggest cash cow, especially when you are power starved and there's load shedding. You have the biggest power tariff on the electricity is more expensive in Karachi than in New York City, which is where I live. It's ridiculous how expensive like basic things are. So you cannot be in that in a normal industry right now in Pakistan. You cannot be a normal investor in Pakistan because, well, it's not a normal economy. Premised on that, if you're saying we're defaulting, no, we're not defaulting, but we are heading towards a new client hunt. We're looking for the new racket. And that's what my project at the Atlantic Council is these days. I'm a fellow in a think tank called the Atlantic Council. We're working on a paper which will hopefully become a whole policy proposal. And I can't talk too much about it, but we are questioning Pakistan's new quest for this racket, because this racket is taking Pakistan to buy a drink. If you can guess, who's the next client? Come on, guys, nobody wants a drink. The next client is the Middle East, the GCC, especially the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, the Kuwaitis. They've made a new instrument of government called the SIFC, the Special Investment Facilitation Council. Think of it like an organization which says, okay, you can sell anything to the Saudis. Okay, they want an airport, give it to them. Okay, the Emiratis want a highway, give it to them. Okay, who wants a steel mill? Okay, the Saudis want a steel mill, give it to them. You can't just walk into a country and say, hey, I want your airport. But now you can in Pakistan. They've made that specifically for the Arabs. And the army's running it. So now they're selling the country because there's nothing else to sell. Because that's the racket. That sucks for your question about ethics. That sucks for Pakistan's plans to catch up. with India, for example, which is your rival still. So you have to adapt to new tech, to go to school. You're at school here, okay, you're using tech I can't use, man. I can't go to Madison. You know, even if I tried. I just went to Columbia 4 years ago. I was having trouble fitting in terms of the tech we were using. Eventually I had to graduate, so I got used to it. You got to go through that pain of adopting and adapting new methods, new industry, new reforms. They're not doing it. They're still running things like the old way, which is the Cold War era policies, and they're running the country into the ground economically. That's a very different animal from the political animal, but it's as ghastly, as scary, the economic animal.
All right, gentlemen in the back, I do not believe my cord is long enough. If you don't mind coming up, we'll have you give the last question as we wrap up tonight. If you come on up here, you can have the mic.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम वजाहत
Walaikum salam.
Arif here.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. I'll start with this quote. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So, Pakistan's history, we've seen this over and over with People's Party, MQM, Muslim League, Noon, and now PDI. They poke the elephant hits back. The two main pillars of the country, the army and the politicians, can't coexist. We have been seeing this for 70 years. Is anyone learning? How do we get out of this? How can we coexist together? A state fighting the two main pillars, always at each other's throat, in one way or the other. The journalists taking sides. How do we learn to coexist? Because unless we do, we're not going to get rid of the elephant. And we're just going to bring that room down, and which is going to kill the elephant and everyone else in the room. And that's where we are today. I don't think the approach of confrontation between the two main strengths in any country, when America's, I'll give you an example with America. America took a big hit in the last few years with people fighting people. People against people. And our reputation, our democracy was threatened. The invasion of the big houses happened. So all those countries which you mentioned which are doing well, they don't have this problem. So how? My question is, if I were to take you back 30 years or 20 years, when do we learn? When do the politicians and the elephant learn to coexist? And how can we make that happen? And what is your role in that?
Oh man, that's a difficult question. So I'm not gonna even pretend to offer solutions. I'm not that guy. I look like that guy. I'm not that guy, right? I think you got the premise of your question is discounts the complicated animal that is the elephant. It also makes it look like it's a very bipolar world with the military versus the civilians. I beg to disagree. I think Pakistan has literally you can very neatly organize the country into a 9, 10, 11 year decade chunk, starting from its inception. It's very easy to say there's been one Pakistan throughout. Not at all, actually. There's been several. And that perhaps that systemic confusion is what's led us to this. So if you bear with me, from 47 to 58, you have a Pakistan which is run by bureaucratic, technocratic leaders without much of a vote. They are a part of the intellectual ruling elite. Jinnah has lost the founder, goes early. Wajahat Khan, the guy I was mentioning, R. Kennedy, he goes pretty early too. And then you have like half a dozen or so. And if you can name all of them, I'll buy you a drink. Half a dozen or so prime ministers, I can name half some of them. Surawardi, Noon, I. Chandrigar, these are the famous ones who, roads are named after these guys, that's how I know them. No, Benazir Bhutto is not in this. This is 47 to 58. Bear with me, madam. Please, bear with me. Muhammad Ali, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Right? It's a very different generation which remembers these names, if you might recall. It's quite interesting. Right? And that is this weird, for the 47 to 58, this is weird technocratic experiment. Technocratic / bureaucratic. Then 58 to 69, Ayub Khan, made in England. Sandhurst, show jumping with Jackie Kennedy, hanging out with the Queen on top of a Cadillac, white tuxedos, cigars, whiskey, polo, right? Very stylish autocrat. Again, very made in England, very Savile Row. He goes off 69 to 77, the next 10 years or so. Bhutto, war, the end of the two-nation experiment. And because the two-nation experiment ends, other experiments have to happen. Nuclear weapons, socialism, Bhutto's Mao hat, Shalwar Kameez, off on Fridays, laws against Ahmadis, new constitution, new name. New name! What country gives itself a new name after 25 years? Had to give yourselves a new name because the old country actually broke up. For me, Pakistan was actually born in 71, not in 47. By the way, this Pakistan was not born in 47. It's a lie. It's an actual constitutional, historical lie. It is. You are not 76 years old. Right? Less. Anyways, 77, 69 to 77, the Bhutto years, you're socialist, you're sort of Maoist, you're sort of Islamist, you're sort of autocratic, you're sort of democratic. What are you? That was a short period of it when he nationalized the economy and broke it down. Islamic socialism. I thought you were being ruled by a guy from Savile Row. Years later, because he was affected by Deng Xiaoping, he went and visited China. He came back with a Mao hat. He thought he could make Pakistan a communist state. Then, 77 to 88, Ziaul Haq, Allahu Akbar, right? Allahu Akbar, right? And you're looking at the most potent, most radical, most violent insurgency known to man, born at home and next door, which is still running, called the Mujahideen / Taliban or whatever, which you godfather Jihad Inc. You godfather it, unfortunately, with Langley and the Brits and the Chinese and the Saudis and everybody else, but you're the main guy. And we're halfway through at this point, Arif, halfway through at this point. Halfway through. So let's do the next ones really quickly. So that ends in 88 when this crazy dictator Zia, who does this Jihad Inc., he blows up for all of you. Then 88 to 99, the next 10, 11 years. You've got this weird hybrid musical chairs with the two-party system, Benazir Nawaz Sharif, the army still in the background. That goes away because another dictator, this one's a little less elegant than the other guy, but loves his whiskey too. Right? Doesn't like horses, but likes poodles. Pervez Musharraf. And now he's America's best friend. So all of a sudden, you were just Islamist and pro-Taliban, or rather pro-Mujahideen, pro-Jihad, like 10 years ago, and now you're like America's best friend, trying to fight a war on terror. And that runs from 99 to 2008. Amazing. And on the streets, to take this left turn, because you're sort of veering left to be pro-American, you got off-shoulder dresses, you got beautiful supermodels running around, you got free TV, free channels. It's fantastic. It looks like a new country, but the fundamentals are rotten. And now we're at 2008. And then 2008 to 2018, Imran Khan. And before him, Asif Zardari and Nawaz Sharif, the second round of hybrid democracy. So what you're at right now is not a bipolar system, but you're in a system which is at war with itself, which has multiple actors with severe personality disorders, almost schizophrenia. You don't know who you are. You don't know whether you're secular. And that was my theme today, that what would Jinnah think? Jinnah would think, I thought we'd be cool. I thought we'd be not a majoritarian state. I thought we'd be tolerant. I thought we'd trade with our neighbors. That's what Jinnah would think, but you don't do any of that. You're not tolerant. You don't trade with your neighbors. You're not clear about your secular credentials. You're clearly not clear about your view on democracy. Jinnah was a Democrat, as we have discussed. He's a lawyer by profession. Definitely unclear about constitutionalism. So what you're looking at now is your seventh cycle. And to answer your question, what is happening to Imran has happened to the other parties in the past, but it's happening at crazy speed. It's happening really fast.
They poked the elephant harder too.
He did. He really poked the bear rather. But
let me ask you the same question another way. The entire history over 70 years, I can give you 6 names, and that's our history. It's a history of clash of personalities. I can give you 6 names, and that's our last 40-year history. Bajwa, going back now, Bajwa, Imran, Nawaz Sharif, Ziaul Haq.
I get it. I get it.
6 names, you take out these 6 names.
Yeah, I get it.
The
But
state is not fighting with itself.
but I'm sorry.
Do you see the problem?
Yeah, I don't want to get into a.
How can we better this?
I don't want to
The
get.
question is, how do we improve?
Okay, so again, I started saying I'm not that guy. Sorry, Doc.
Yeah.
I'm not your guy. I don't have the question. I don't have the answers, but I got the questions. So here's a question: which society, which political economy doesn't have leaders who don't change history? That's why you become a leader. So we can't just keep on harping about. You can't go back to unless you know Marty and the other Doc. And have access to that time machine and go back to the future, right? It's silly to talk about Bajwa and Musharraf. You stop looking back. You can only look back in terms of seeing trends and how they make sense today. But you can't blame individuals. They're gone. Musharraf is dead, man. Bajwa's living in a penthouse in Dubai. He crashed. He blew up in the air. I can't harp on about him. And say if they were not here, I can't if they were not here my way through Pakistan. In order to look forward, we must again debate actual reforms. To finally answer your question about what can be done, in no particular order, support independent initiatives, support think tanks, support the academy, support independent journalists, make schools. Don't just TCF your way through life. Don't just zakat your way through life. Get organized here, right? Don't just build a token school and send in a token few $1,000s and get your rich guilt out of the way. Get involved, get organized. Don't just send WhatsApp forwards to your friends and debate on social media. Do something, write, publish, vlog, use your contacts. Make waves, make change. We can talk about it all night. I'll have a customized solution for each and every one of you. I don't charge. So come to me and talk to me about, how you can contribute. I don't know your station. I don't know whether you're an academic. I don't know whether you're a Pakistani American. You want to go back. You want to stay in the background. You want to be up front. But you can't what if your way through life. As far as looking back is concerned. You gotta what now? your way forward. That's what I recommend.
Thank you so much. Well, it sounds like you could go on all night about that, but unfortunately our time here is running out. So I did want to thank you so much, thank Mr. Wajahat Khan for coming over and speaking with us, making the drive down. And I appreciate you offering that perspective. But yeah, one more time, can a round of applause. Thank you. All right, well, one more time, I wanted to just shout out, thank you very much to our MSc intern, Manal Hassan, for making that connection and helping bring in time.
Thank you. Thank you, Manal.
And on behalf of the Asian Pacific Islander and Daisy American Student Center here, or PETA Student Center, thank you all as audience members for coming here and attending our event. Thank you to the Center for South Asia one more time for helping support and co-sponsor this event. And it sounds like a lot to talk about, always is. Excellent conversation. I appreciate you going into in-depth about everything. And if you're ever in another event with Mr. Khan, it sounds like if you study more, he might be buying you 5 or 6 drinks. Is that right? But in any case, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful night.
All right. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.